Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Jolene from ALE Property Australia, and today we're talking about the Australian Federal Budget 2026. This is the biggest shakeup in property investment tax rules in Australia in over 25 years. And if you own a property here or you're thinking about buying, I'm here to help you understand it if it might affect you. I'm going to break it all down in plain English. What it means if you already own a property here and what it means if you're still planning your investment here. Let's get into it. So what has actually changed? The government has made one very clear decision with this budget. It has significantly reduced the tax advantages that property investors have enjoyed for decades, but only for people buying existing second-hand properties. At the same time, it has kept all of those tax benefits fully intact for people who buy brand new properties. The result is straightforward. All the major tax incentives that Australian property investors care about, negative gearing, capital gains tax discounts, now flow to new properties and new properties only. Every tax lever in this budget points in the same direction: new builds. This is a crucial point for you as an overseas buyer because it changes the competitive landscape you are entering. Local Australian investors who previously spread their activity across both established and new properties now have a very strong tax reason to move towards new builds. That is the same type of property you can buy as an offshore purchaser. The pool of buyers competing for quality new stock is about to get larger, and the best stock will go quickly. Let's talk to those of you who already own residential properties in Australia. And I want to start with the most important point. Your existing property is protected completely. The government introduced something called grandfathering. In plain English, if you already own your property before budget night, which was 7:30 p.m. on 12th of May 2026, the new rules simply do not apply to you. You keep playing by the old rules for as long as you hold that property. Nothing changes about how your rental income is treated today. And any profit you have already built up in your property up to July 2027 is still taxed under the old, more favorable rules. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is very important for existing property owners in Australia to think about, and that is what happens when you eventually decide to sell. With the budget changes pushing local investors away from established properties, the most likely buyer of your property in the future is increasingly going to be owner-occupier, someone buying it as their home, not as an investment. This matters a lot for what kind of properties hold their value best moving forward. Owner-occupiers buy differently from investors. They are not just running numbers on a spreadsheet. They care about the quality of the finishes, how livable the floor plan is, the feel of the building, the suburb, the lifestyle around it. They buy with both their head and their hearts. So properties that were designed and bought purely as investor-grade product, think small floor plans, poor natural light, no sense of livability, those are going to face a harder resale story in this environment. But properties that feel like a genuine home, well designed, well located, something a family or a professional would actually want to live in, those are going to hold their value well because the owner-occupier buyer pool is deep and motivated. It is worth reflecting on where your property sits on that spectrum as you think about your longer term plans. One more thing I want to clarify specifically for our overseas clients who already own property here. You may have seen a lot of coverage about capital gains tax changes in the budget, the 50% CGT discount that is being removed. That discount only ever applied to Australian tax residents. As a foreign investor, you were never eligible for it to begin with. So with the new CGT rules, It does not make your position any worse than it already was. That is an important distinction that got lost in a lot of media noise around this budget. What you decide to do with your property, whether you hold it, sell it, or add to your portfolio, depends entirely on your own plans, your own financial position, and your own goals. That is not something we can give a blanket advice on in general video. But if you would like to talk through how this specifically affects your situation, reach out and we can have a chat or conversation. Now, for those of you who are looking to buy an Australian residential property, whether as a first-timer or adding to your portfolio, as an offshore buyer based overseas, the most important thing to understand is this. The 2026 Australian tax budget has not taken anything away from you. Your pathway into Australian residential property is exactly as what it has always been: new properties purchased with FIRB approval. What has changed is everything else around you. Local Australian investors who previously could choose between second-hand and new properties now have a very strong tax reason to choose new properties. That is creating a significant and immediate shift in where local investor demand is heading, and it is heading directly towards the same new properties you're looking at. What does that mean practically? It means competition for quality new stock is going to increase. The good projects in the right locations with the right product, they're going to attract more buyers than before. When more buyers chase limited supply, prices reflect that. Good stock will see fierce competition. And here is something the data is already telling us. Melbourne is on track for a deficit of about 52,000 homes by 2029 against what the population actually needs. New apartment construction is running at roughly half the volume of the peak years. Many approved projects have stalled because of construction costs and financing pressures. Rental vacancy across Melbourne is sitting at about 1.5%, which is extremely tight. So you have a city that is already severely undersupplied in new apartments and a budget that has just redirected a wave of local investor demand towards the exact same asset class. So I want to be honest with you about something because I think it's important. The tax incentive attached to new builds is real, but a tax incentive does not turn a poorly located or a poorly built property into a good investment. That has always been true, and it is more true now than ever. Developers know the tax story is attached to new stock, and some will use that to sell products that does not stand on their own merits. What you should really be focusing on is the same thing that has always driven long-term property performance: location, livability, rental demand, the quality of the build, and what the property looks like to the next buyer when you eventually want to sell. A well-located, well-designed new apartment in an established Melbourne suburb with genuine tenant demand, that is where the fundamentals and the policy settings are both pointing right now. The properties that tick all those boxes are going to attract the most attention and buyers. So if you found something like that, grab it first. Before I wrap up, I want to share what the experts and major institutions are saying about where the market is heading, because I think you deserve a clear-eyed view, not just a sales pitch. The honest picture is this. Forecasts for Melbourne were already wide before this budget landed, and the budget has added another layer of complexity. Here is where the major institutions stand right now, specifically after the budget. Commonwealth Bank revised its Melbourne price to forecast down to a 3% decline for 2026, driven primarily by rising interest rates, which the RBA has now lifted twice this year, plus the drag from reduced investor demand in the established market. But CBA was also clear. The 3% is relative to where the prices would otherwise have been. It does not mean a crash. For many segments, it means slower growth or prices moving sideways for a period. ANZ, which was already the most cautious of all the big banks, forecasts a modest decline for Melbourne in 2026, but is one of the more optimistic voices for 2027, forecasting Melbourne to be among the fastest growing capital cities as the rate cycle turns. KPMG, whose forecasts have been among the most closely watched this year, projected Melbourne unit prices to grow 7.1% this year, the strongest unit price forecast of any Australian capital city, driven by what their chief economist called a genuine underlying demand. The key variable that will determine which of these scenarios plays out is the interest rate. If interest rates begin to ease in 2027, as most economists expect, Melbourne's structural advantages, its deep undersupply, fastest population growth of any Australian capital, and historically wide price discount to Sydney reassert themselves strongly. For new apartments specifically, the budget has added a genuine structural tailwind on top of those fundamentals. Local investor demand is redirecting into this space. Supply is critically constrained, and rental vacancy is at levels that support continued rent growth. The one clear message from every serious analyst is that quality and location matter more than ever. The tech story is real, but it is a tailwind for good property, not a rescue for bad property. Where you buy and what you buy remains the most important decision. I will be doing a dedicated video specifically on Melbourne market outlook and other selected key cities very soon. So if you want a deeper dive into the numbers and what the cycle looks like from here, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. For now, if you would like to understand how all of this applies to your specific situation, whether you already own property here or are planning to invest, reach out to us. We can walk you through what it means for you personally. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this useful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it as well.